All the men of her acquaintance either pitied or despised her for it. Her father said nothing. Her brothers were less cautious, and summed up their opinion of Lionel in the curt, scornful assertion that he showed a tendency to cheat at tennis. But May would never hear ill of him. He was a god to her, and she could not hide her worship. For more than a year, until lately, she had been almost sure of him, and then came a faint, vague rumor concerning Lionel and May Lawton, a rumor which she had refused to take seriously. The encounter of that afternoon, and Miss Lawton's triumphant remark, had dazed her. For 7 hours she had existed in a kind of semi-conscious delirium, in which she could perceive nothing but the fatal fact, emerging more clearly every moment from the welter of her thoughts, that she had lost Lionel. Lionel had proposed to May Lawton, had been accepted, just before she surprised them together, and Lionel, with a man's excusable cowardice, had left his betrothed to announce the engagement. She tore up the photograph, put the fragments in the grate, and set a light to them. Her father's step sounded on the stairs. He hesitated, and knocked sharply at her door. "What's burning, May?" "It's all right, Father," she answered calmly. "I'm only burning some papers in the fire grate." "Well, see you don't burn the house down." He passed on. Then she found a sheet of notepaper, and wrote on it in pencil, using the mantelpiece for a desk. "Dear home, good night, good-bye." She cogitated and wrote further. "Forgive me. May." She put the message in an envelope and wrote on the envelope Jim, and placed it prominently in front of the clock. But after she had looked at it for a minute she wrote Father above Jim, and then Herbert below. There were noises in the hall. The boys had returned earlier than she expected. As they went along the corridor and caught a glimpse of her light under the door, Jim cried gaily, "Now then, out with that light. A little thing like you ought to be asleep hours since." She listened for the bang of their door, and then, very hurriedly, she removed her pink frock and put on an old black one, which was rather tight in the waist. And she donned her hat, securing it carefully with both pins, extinguished the candles, and crept quietly downstairs, and so by the back door into the garden. Carlo, the retriever, came halfway out of his kennel and greeted her in the moonlight with a yawn. She patted his head and ran stealthily up the garden, through the gate, and up the waste greenland toward the crown of the hill. 4. The top of Toft End is the highest land in the Five Towns, and from it may be clearly seen all the lurid evidences of manufacture which sweep across the borders of the sky on north, east, west, and south. Northeastwards lie the moorlands, and far off Manifold, the metropolis of the moorlands, as it is called. On this night the furnaces of Red Cow Iron Works in the hollow to the east were in full blast. Their fluctuating yellow light illuminated queerly the grass of the fields above Dean's house, and the regular roar of their breathing reached that solitary spot like the distant rumour of some leviathan beast angrily fuming. Further away to the southwest, the Cauldron Bar Iron Works reproduced the same phenomena, and round the whole horizon, near and far, except to the northeast, the lesser fires of labour leapt and flickered and glinted in their mists of smoke, burning ceaselessly, as they burned every night and every day at all seasons of all years. The town of Bursley slept in the deep valley to the west, and vast Hanbridge in the shallower depression to the south, like two sleepers accustomed to rest quietly amid great disturbances. The beacons of their town halls and churches kept watch, and the whole scene was dominated by the placidity of the moon, which had now risen clear of the Red Cow furnace clouds, and was passing upwards through tracts of stars. Into this scene, climbing up from the direction of Manifold, came Lionel Woolley, nearly at midnight, having walked some 18 miles in a vain effort to re-establish his self-satisfaction by a process of reasoning and ingenious excuses. Lionel felt that in the brief episode of the afternoon he had scarcely behaved with dignity. In other words, he was fully and painfully aware that he must have looked a fool, a coward, an ass, a contemptible and pitiful person, in the eyes of at least one girl, if not two. He did not like this. No man would have liked it, and to Lionel the memory of an undignified act was acute torture. Why had he bidden the girls adieu and departed? Why had he, in fact, run away? What precisely would May Lawton think of him? How could he explain his conduct to her, and to himself? And had that worshipping, affectionate thing, May Deane, taken note of his confusion? Of the confusion of him who was never confused, who was equal to every occasion and every emergency? These were some of the questions which harried him, and declined to be settled. He had walked to Manifold, and had tea at the Roebuck, and walked back, and still the questions were harrying. And as he came over the hill by the field path, and descried the lone house of the Deanes in the light of the Red Cow furnaces and of the moon, the worship of May Deane seemed suddenly very precious to him, and he could not bear to think that any stupidity of his could have impaired it. Then he saw May Deane walking slowly across the field, close to an abandoned pit shaft, whose low protecting circular wall of brick was crumbling to ruin on the side nearest to him.